Well, hello, friends, and welcome yet again to another installment of Strange Planet. And it is a far stranger planet than we can possibly comprehend. And on this episode, I am thrilled to sit down with a man who's shaking the foundations of astrophysics and daring to ask the questions others won't touch. Dr. Avi Loeb is the Baird Professor of Science at Harvard University, a former chair of its astronomy department, the mind behind the best-selling books Extraterrestrial and Interstellar. But he's no ordinary stargazer. When Oumuamua, that strange cigar-shaped visitor, streaked through our solar system in 2017, Dr. Loeb didn't just shrug and call it a rock. He proposed it might be an alien probe, a relic of advanced technology from beyond our stars. The scientific establishment rolled its eyes, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he launched the Galileo Project, a mission to hunt for extraterrestrial artifacts in our skies, oceans, and even on the moon. With governments now admitting UFOs or UAPs are real, his work feels like science fiction, or less like science fiction and more like a wake-up call. Dr. Loeb blends cutting-edge physics with cosmic courage, challenging us to rethink humanity's place in the universe. And he'll be appearing at Contact in the Desert. We'll give you details a little bit later. But first of all, welcome to Strange Planet, Dr. Avi Loeb.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's start with Oumuamua. Maybe you could just begin with a very brief primer for those not familiar with this amazing interstellar artifact.
So on October 19th, 2017, the first object from outside the solar system was spotted by a telescope in Hawaii. It was given the name Oumuamua, which means a scout in the Hawaiian language. And everyone assumed that it's either a comet or an asteroid. These are the type of objects we've seen in the solar system. Yet there was no cometary tail, no evaporation of gas visible to the telescopes. And even deep observations by space telescopes could not see any dust or gas around it. But it was pushed away from the sun by some mysterious force, not as a result of rocket propulsion, the way that the standard comets are being propelled. And moreover, the amount of sunlight reflected from it changed by a factor of 10 as it was tumbling every 8 hours. It had the size of a football field, about 100 meters. And of course, my colleagues argued, well, it's a rock of a type that we've never seen before. And it might, most recently, they argued just a couple of months ago that it might have been a dark comet. By that, they mean a comet for which we can't see the cometary tail, which resembles, the statement that of the adults in the room to the kid who said the emperor has no clothes. And they said, well, you just can't see them. And
if we don't understand something, we call it dark. Dark matter,
exactly.
Dark comets, dark. Yeah.
Exactly. And I suggested it's just a reflection of sunlight that is pushing it. And in fact, a few years later, there was an object identified as being pushed by reflecting sunlight. And a few weeks later, it was realized it's the data from the same telescope in Hawaii. It was realized by the astronomers that it's actually an upper part of the Surveyor lander on the moon that was launched by NASA in 1966. There was another incident actually just on January 2nd this year, 2025, when an amateur astronomer reported a new asteroid that came near Earth, and the Minor Planet Center gave it a name. And then 17 hours later, astronomers realized, oh, that one actually has exactly the orbital parameters of the Tesla Roadster car that was launched by SpaceX, which is now moving around the sun. And my point is that astronomers call objects dark comets just because they cannot figure them out. In fact, near Earth, there are many objects that are cataloged as empty trash bag objects. And these are objects not moving just as a result of gravity, but are also being pushed around by radiation pressure and are doing strange motions around Earth. And astronomers just say, oh, these are empty trash bags. They are just broken pieces of satellites. and we don't need to model them. We don't need to pay attention to them. So then, when SETI scientists argue we don't have any credible evidence for unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP, what they mean actually is we don't pay attention to anomalous objects. In other words, when they appear near Earth, we call them empty trash bag objects and shove them under the carpet and just say, oh, it's nothing. These are human-made by assumption, not because they study them. And then when an object like Oumuamua comes from outside the solar system, oh, that one cannot be a broken piece of a satellite. Therefore, it's a dark comet. In other words, we can see. So, it's just like calling koalas monkeys without a tail. It's a completely different animal. And when you call a koala a monkey without a tail, you basically are trying to suggest that it's a monkey, but it's not a monkey. I mean, spacecraft are not dark comets.
Very, very quickly, would you categorize the what they call the Black Knight satellite, a similar type object? Again, that's dismissed as an empty trash bag.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, there is a whole catalog of such objects, and I plan to look into it. I didn't realize that it exists. It's only after I saw so many cases of mistaken identity. That when astronomers thought it's a near-Earth asteroid, and it turned out to be a technological artifact produced by us. Now, my complaint is that you cannot allow that possibility that it's actually technologically made only for objects near Earth, and then dismiss it and ridicule it when you deal with an object like Oumuamua. If you allow it for objects near Earth, you need to allow it for all objects. And that's exactly what I did with respect to Oumuamua, without knowing that there is this, all this space trash around Earth, which is treated in a different way.
So, assuming Oumuamua is some sort of an alien craft, how would you propose, or what do you propose it's doing? Is it watching us? Is it just passing through on a mission maybe we can't even fathom?
Well, we don't know because we didn't get enough data on it. Astronomers assumed that it's either an asteroid or a comet, and the title that was given to it changed. At first, it was a comet, then it was an asteroid, then a comet, maybe a dark comet. And as a result, we lost time and didn't really take all the data possible about it. And now it's too far away, so we can't really observe it. And the key would be with the Rubin telescope that starts operations this year in Chile. That's a much better survey telescope with a 3.2 gigapixel camera. We should find Oumuamua-like objects every few months and study them much better with, for example, the Webb telescope that we have now at our disposal.
What kind of civilization, let's speculate a little bit, what kind of a civilization could build something like that? Are we talking about beings millions of years ahead of us, or maybe, I don't know, machines that outlived their makers? What?
Yeah, it could be. So here are two examples of objects that would behave like Oumuamua did, in the sense of having a large surface area for their mass. For example, imagine a megastructure, like a Dyson sphere, where a civilization is trying to harvest much more energy from the host star than it has from the surface of the planet that it lives on. And Freeman Dyson imagined such a thing, and there were searches for Dyson spheres around stars. But the point is, stars evolve, and the sun will brighten up starting in 1 billion years and will become very bright. So if any civilizations were to build a Dyson sphere around their host star, after billions of years, the star may blow this megastructure apart because it will become much brighter. It will basically break it. We just didn't think about that. So I actually wrote a paper about the broken pieces from Dyson spheres as being a potential origin of Oumuamua. But in addition, it could be a surface layer of a bigger technological object that was torn apart, or maybe something that we can't really imagine, as you say, because we only had 100 years of modern science and technology, and they could have had 1 million or 1 billion years. I should just mention that the sun is a latecomer on the cosmic scene because it only formed 4.6 billion years ago, and that's exactly 1/3 of the age of the universe. So the solar system came to exist only in the last 1/3 of cosmic history, and most stars formed billions of years before the sun.
Ah, interesting. The Galileo Project, you've called it a scientific fishing expedition for alien tech. Let's say you hook something big, say a metallic fragment humming with energy. What's the first thing you do with it?
Well, I will examine what it's doing, what might have been the technological goal and intention of whoever produced it. And, I went to the Pacific Ocean in search for the materials from the wreckage of an interstellar meteor that was spotted by US government satellites back in 2014. That was the second another interstellar object that was a very different size, just half a meter in size, and collided with Earth and burned up in the atmosphere as a meteor. And it had an unusual material strength, much higher than all other meteors that we're familiar with. It also was moving faster than 95% of the stars near the sun. So it was very fast and must have been made of very tough material. I wanted to find out what it's made of. And we went to the Pacific Ocean, collected some materials and analyzed them in the laboratory over the past year and found some molten droplets less than a millimeter in size that have a chemical composition that is different from materials that made the solar system. And we hope to go again and collect bigger pieces with a robot that we will place on the ocean floor. At the moment, we are seeking the funding for that. It will be several $1 million, and we haven't yet received the funding. We do have the ship reserved, but without the funding, we won't be able to go there.
Tell me more then about the Galileo Project. You have a ship reserved. What are we talking about here?
This is for an expedition to retrieve bigger pieces of the interstellar meteor that I mentioned. But within the Galileo Project, we also build observatories that are monitoring the sky at all times in the infrared, optical, radio, and audio in an attempt to detect unusual objects, UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomena, that the US government talks about. But, we realize the sky is not classified. And just like any other astronomy observatory, we are searching the sky. And so far, we have an operating observatory at Harvard University, and we collect about 100,000 objects in the sky every month, and then study them with machine learning, artificial intelligence, trying to figure out if any of them is not familiar, different from birds, drones, balloons, airplanes, things that we know about. There is another observatory that we are planning to put together within the coming months in Pennsylvania, and a third one in Nevada. Both of these new observatories should be completed by the end of summer 2025. And after that, we should have a few million objects every year that we monitor. And then there would be a fourth observatory that we are planning in Indiana that will take a little more time to build, maybe a couple of years after that. We have funding for all of these, and the goal is to see whether even one object in a million might be of extraterrestrial origin. And for that, we will need to analyze the data, and if we find something unusual, we'll report about it.
The U.S. government has been dropping UAP reports like breadcrumbs. Do you suspect they're sitting on a motherlode of alien evidence, maybe even wreckage, maybe just waiting for someone like you to force their hand?
I don't know. I haven't seen the data they have, and I don't know how credible it is and what it might imply, whether they have materials, whether they have just footage or satellite data. Haven't seen it. If it has nothing to do with human-made the technologies from adversarial nations, I encourage the government to share it with scientists like myself because it will save me time. But I don't rely on government because they are mainly focused on national security. Uh, what lies outside the solar system is not their day job. It's my day job. And therefore, if they want to share it, I would love to see whatever they have and help them figure it out. But otherwise, I'm hoping to find the data myself.
You've talked about cosmic humility. So let's accept that we might not be the brightest kids on the block. But what if we are the anomaly? I mean, what if Earth is the only planet crazy enough to broadcast its existence while maybe the others are hiding in silence?
Yeah, they might be smarter than us or maybe bruised by previous contacts. We had only 100 years of modern science and technology. Quantum mechanics was discovered exactly 100 years ago. And the best chips, computer chips that we are now manufacturing on the atomic level, that they are all based on science that was done a century ago. So if we have just this knowledge, it might well be that the technologies of the future are far more sophisticated and they already have them. Also, we transmitted radio signals for maybe a century, and those radio signals propagated 100 light years so far. And there aren't many stars within that distance. If we wait another century, the number of stars that will encounter our radio signals will increase by a factor of 8. And so every time we double the distance out to which the signal gets, we would get of other 8 times more stars watching us. And it's possible we will hear back, but it will take time. I mean, the response might arrive, 1,000 years into the future. However, civilizations that had a long history may have been bruised by transmitting those signals, and therefore they stopped doing that. And we are naive enough, or we are too focused on what happens on Earth not to think about it. The basic point is we are sort of like infants on our home planet, and we look around and through the window and see some other houses that look just like ours. But most of us claim, oh yeah, in fact, these houses do not have any residents. It's an extraordinary claim to argue that there are infants like us on other inside those other houses. But the reality of the situation is that one day we might have a neighbor knocking on our door or appearing in our backyard, or maybe it happened in the past. And we're just not aware of that because of the short history. The documented human history is only 8,000 years old. We just don't know what happened before. And this is just 1/1,000,000th of the history of the Milky Way galaxy. So just think about it. We have a record of what happened in the last 1/1,000,000th of history. We know nothing, basically.
Let's imagine Oumuamua is like one of those, like a cosmic bottle. People who are stranded on islands will, put a message in a bottle and throw it out to sea and hope that someone's discovering it. So if Oumuamua is a cosmic bottle with a note inside, what do you think it would say? Hello, help, or stay away?
My guess is there were lots of civilizations like us that died by now because their star evolved. The sun within 1 billion years, which is just 20% of the age of the solar system. Just in 20 years of the current age, it will boil off all the oceans on Earth, and there won't be any life as we know it on the surface of Earth. Earth will become a desert. And since most stars are billions of years older than the sun, it's quite likely that they went through that phase. Okay, so imagine a civilization like ours that where the star brightened and basically boiled off the oceans on the habitable planet like Earth, and then they were crying for help. Of course, the very wealthy individuals, like those space entrepreneurs that we know about, like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and others, Richard Branson, they obviously will have their own ship and leave the planet in time, or they or their families, when the risk becomes quite significant. But most of the people will be left behind because it will be very expensive to transport billions of people, under these circumstances. So I can imagine a lot of planets where there were tragedies in the past that we are not aware of because we were not around to hear their cries. And you can imagine them sending out kites through the Milky Way galaxy and saying, here we were, and we're about to die, and we just wanted to let you know. Things like pamphlets or whatever they can send out. You can also imagine that any technological debris that was left behind around the planet was eventually carried out to interstellar space because the host star became very bright and there was a powerful wind coming from it that swept those technological relics to interstellar space. So what I'm suggesting is to do archaeology in interstellar space and search for those relics. There might be a lot of space trash among the rocks, and we haven't really searched. And I just wrote a paper a few weeks ago suggesting to build a space telescope that will search for those for space trash within very close to the lamppost, which is the sun. Because the sun illuminates the darkness of the space around us, and we could find the keys under the lamppost. And it would cost, of course, billions of dollars to do a very thorough search. Right now, there are 1 million objects that are roughly the size of a person from interstellar space within the orbit of the Earth around the sun. But we can't see them with existing telescopes. We need to build a dedicated telescope. That's why I placed a bet against Elon Musk a couple of months ago, in which I said, I'm willing to put 1% of my net worth against 1% of his net worth in an effort to build observatories that will search for technological relics of other civilizations. Because Elon Musk argued that we're probably alone and therefore we should go to Mars in order to preserve ourselves. And I tried to argue that we are probably not alone. And I wrote that on medium.com that if we don't find anything within a decade, I'm willing to give Elon another 1% of my net worth.
Astroarchaeology, I've never heard that before. It's fascinating. Have you coined that term? Is that a brand new field of endeavor? Astroarchaeology.
Yes, I actually coined it in my book. Afterwards, some astronomers said, oh, yeah, that was used before. But what they really mean is, there is space trash that humans produced around the Earth. And, in principle, you can dig into that and find relics from the space age, things that we launched in the past, over the past since 1957, when the first Sputnik spacecraft was launched. And so, of course, you can call archaeology in space, you can call looking for relics that were made by humans. But what I'm really referring to is extraterrestrial space archaeology.
The moon's a big focus for the Galileo Project. If we find, or you find, artificial structures there, I don't know, a monolith or a beacon, do you think it would be a welcome mat or a keep out sign from a past visitor?
It could be from a past visitor, and if it has buttons, the question is, should we press a button? That will be a very difficult question. And I asked my students in class about it, and they said, please don't press a button if you find something like that, because it could endanger all of us. And the other half of the class said, please do press it. We want to see what will happen. But obviously, I will try to first understand what the purpose of this thing is. we should be open-minded. Both the moon and Mars behaved like museums. They collected everything that collided with them on their surface. There wasn't much geological activity to mix those things with the interior, like the Earth had. And there is no atmosphere that will burn up debris that is colliding with these objects right now. So we should survey the land, both on the moon and on Mars. I also am interested in going into caves on Mars and checking if there are any wall paintings there.
Oh, that would be amazing. That would be amazing. Um, let's talk a bit more about these metallic spheres you recovered from the Pacific. Possible fragments of an interstellar object. What if they're not just debris? Maybe, what if they're tiny machines like, I don't know, nanotech seeds that were planted to study us or even reshape our world? Does that concern you?
No, I mean, there were definitely molten fragments that were left over from an explosion because there were missing volatile elements that usually get evaporated during an explosion. So I think of them more of debris that was processed through the heat of thousands of degrees that you get from the fireball of a meteor. But what we really are after is the main object or big chunks of the original object that may be lying on the ocean floor. For that, we really need to go there with a remotely operated vehicle and with a video feed and look for those fragments. And that's my goal for the next expedition. And at the moment, we are seeking funding at the level of a few $1 million. I hope we will get it. Otherwise, the expedition will be postponed.
Some say the universe is too quiet, no signals, no visitors. But what if it's not quiet at all? What if advanced civilizations are screaming at us, but they're maybe they're screaming at us in ways too primitive to hear or too advanced to hear, like, I don't know, like whales that are trying to or whales that are ignoring a radio broadcast.
Yeah, that's quite possible. And the people who stay lonely are those that do not realize that their potential partners might be standing in front of them. I know of many people who say, well, I have nobody that I can partner with. But in fact, it's just them not accepting the data and processing it correctly. There are plenty of opportunities that they face, but they are ignoring them. And I don't know if you have friends like that, but there are many people that stay lonely because they don't process properly the information about potential partners.
That was me for too long.
So it's when you deal with technology, it's very possible that we just don't process the signals that we receive properly. And for example, we regard some signals as natural when they are not really natural, that they have something encoded in them. Or we don't recognize something in the sky just because our imagination is limited by the technologies we defined so far. So it's just, if something doesn't transmit in a way that we are used to, we might not detect it.
So the Fermi paradox kind of haunts us and taunts us. Like, where is everybody? What's your wildest theory? Are we in a cosmic zoo, a simulation, or maybe we're just late to a party that ended eons ago?
I think what people miss very often is that how vast is space. The nearest star is 4 light years away, so it takes light 4 years to travel the distance to the nearest star. And then the Milky Way disk is tens of thousands of light years in size. The distance to the center of the Milky Way galaxy is about 30,000 light years. And that means that we are dealing with a huge space. And even if things were launched, it just takes a long time. We can only see things very close to us. And we could detect objects right now like Oumuamua that are the size of a football field, but there should be many more objects that are much smaller. Think of plenty of objects that might be CubeSat size, and that's 10 centimeters or a meter. These are not detectable. Even if they pass within the orbit of the Earth around the sun, they don't reflect enough sunlight for the present-day telescopes to detect them. So it might be around us. We just didn't do the survey as of yet. And that's what I'm aiming to look for. Now, in terms of radio signals, this is an old technology. We are not using it as much as we used to a century ago, and it's possible that in the future we won't use it much. And other civilizations may have transmitted some signals, but if they transmitted it 1,000,000 years ago, they will be 1,000,000 light years away. That's very different from probes like Voyager that we launched that will remain bound by gravity to the Milky Way galaxy. So these probes will keep accumulating over time, just like plastics in the ocean. They don't escape like radio signals. And that's why it's a much better opportunity for us to find the evidence for other civilizations than looking for radio signals, I think. And the SETI community, unfortunately, is focused on electromagnetic signals, not on objects. They don't want to discuss those objects in their conferences, which I find inappropriate, and especially given the anomalies that some people report about. But in terms of Fermi's paradox, I think the biggest mistake that Fermi himself made was to ask this question without even building a telescope. He didn't even attempt. He just assumed that they would come for lunch with him. And that's the mistake often made by people who stay lonely. They think that they're very attractive, but what you tell them is, your partner will not necessarily come to you. You are not that significant. You need to search for them. We tend to think that we are the center of the universe. That was the Vatican's point of view during the days of Copernicus and Galileo. And in 1992, the Vatican admitted that Galileo was correct, that the Earth is not at the center of the universe. That was a little bit late, 350 years after Galileo died, and 2 decades after we landed on the moon. My point is, we nowadays, most of my colleagues or astrobiologists would argue that something like us on an exoplanet is an extraordinary claim. And I would say, no, it's an ordinary claim. We're just imagining something that came to exist on a planet like the Earth, occurring under similar circumstances on another planet that resembles the Earth-Sun system. What is the issue here? It sounds completely reasonable and common sense. Why should common sense be controversial? This means that we should be engaged with putting funds towards the search, and that means billions of dollars. The mainstream of the astronomy community is willing to put $10 billion to the Habitable World Observatory that will be constructed at best by the 2040s. And I'm just saying, let's hedge our bets instead of seeking microbes like that the observatory will do. It would look for the chemical composition of atmospheres on exoplanets, look for the fingerprints of microbes. And I say it's much more interesting to search for intelligent beings. And if we find a gadget, the evidence will be conclusive, much more conclusive than looking for chemical fingerprints of microbes. And it will be much more consequential for our future. And the public cares more about it. So why should academia ignore the interests of the public and just focus on microbes? That's not clear to me.
Your work bridges science and philosophy. If you prove alien tech exists, do you think it's going to unite humanity in awe, or is it going to fracture us in fear and paranoia?
I'm an optimist, and I think it's really important for us to know the reality that we live in. And if we have neighbors, we better know about it. And then we can adapt to it. The same way we adapted to the notion that we are not at the center of the universe. I mean, that was shocking. It didn't flatter our ego, but it's good to know because now we can reach Mars. Knowing that Mars is not orbiting the Earth allows us to reach it. And for the same reason, if we know that we have neighbors, then we can adapt to that. And if we prefer not to know that, then one day we might see a neighbor in our backyard, and that would be too late.
Avi, you're going to be appearing at Contact in the Desert. That's happening May 29th to June 2nd in Coachella, California. Contactinthedesert.com for more information. Very quickly, what are you going to be speaking about? And do we have any times or dates yet for you?
I will be speaking primarily on the results so far from the Galileo Project and the plans for the future. So the things we touched on, and I very much look forward to that presentation and to the feedback from the audience.
Again, contactinthedesert.com, May 29th to June 2nd. And people can find your articles at avi-loeb.medium.com. I'll put the link in the episode notes so people can click on it and they'll go right there. Avi, Dr. Loeb, thank you so much. What a great privilege.
Thank you for having me. It was a great fun speaking with you.
A new Richard Syrett's Strange Planet drops every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.